Good morning. We're going to talk about export pathways, sort of a roadmap for companies as they want to go through the export market. This is about a 5-hour topic that we're trying to do in 15 minutes. So it's going to be very quick, and you will have some work to do, and you're going to have to read the slides that are on here, because there's some good information in there that I just don't have time to go through. You recognize all the reasons why a company should be exporting. This is a well-worn path. We're not going to spend time on it for this morning's session. All very important things, drive a lot of jobs across the United States, and a lot of export sales are critical to job growth. So we'll skip past this and we'll get on to some of the real details. If you're viewing this now as an exporter, as a company that chooses to go to market, you've started to make the decision, now let's go and get busy. First thing, and it's been mentioned by Tracy and others, is you really need a plan. You can't go into this blindly. You really need to think about what you want to do. It's good for any business to plan their activities, to plan where they want to go. Specific things, and you really want to figure out why you want to go into the export market. Is it just to boost sales? Is it to create channel partners, to go create other partnerships that will grow your business both internally and externally? You want to look into tapping into skill bases, whether it be infrastructure, intellectual property, software development. There are a lot of great resources in foreign markets that you can partner up with, and it has a great ability for you to expand your business beyond that point. So think about that. Channel partners, if you're manufacturing for the United States and any other place, your supply chain. But think about really what you're going to market for. It's not all great stuff. We're going to start to sell into 5 different markets, and our sales are going to grow exponentially. There's a lot of work to be done, but there are other things to be considered beyond just the sales aspect of it. Know your partners. When you get into the idea of going to a different market, it's really critical that you know all about that market. Research your market, research your people, the partners with your customer base, understand how and what they buy and why they buy. We'll talk more about that in a second. But also assess what you can really do. What do you have the bandwidth to do within your own staff to do? Right? Can you really dedicate another 2 or 3 or 4 people full-time to go to this marketplace? Do you have the financial resources to dig deep when required for that travel? There are some great grant activities and things that have been mentioned here, the STEP grants and others, that are good access, good things to use. However, you really need to make an assessment of what you're capable of doing. And then really figure about knowing the functional aspects, the real turning the crank things going to the foreign markets. I bring a lot of these things up, and I'm very big on the planning aspect. Having done this many times in many markets, if you go in without understanding why you're going in there, or really what you're trying to achieve, without very specific goals and targets and time frames, you have a great possibility of spending a lot of time for little response. So it's a good part of the process. Keeping with the planning process is assessing your readiness. What can you really do? What are the sales channels locally? This is a really important point, understanding the sales channels, understanding the cultures, the tariffs. The tariff aspect I'll talk about more because it absolutely can destroy your competitiveness in a market. The local sales process, bidding process. We work in the infrastructure phase, which the tenders are generally international tenders. They involve governments, they involve utilities. The tenders are very specific and have lots and lots of regulations to them. But if you don't understand what you're going to be obligated for in those tenders, you will be in big trouble. You'll spend a lot of time and money for nothing because you just didn't understand the process. So no matter if you're in technology or infrastructure or wherever the other pieces of things you may be involved with, understand all the aspects of the market when you go there. Roles of agents and distributors, another really key part. In different countries, those agents and distributors have very different functions and responsibilities, and they also have an impact on how you distributors, and certainly how you do your accounting and what you do on your international finance and revenue recognition. Local content laws is another important piece. When we work with government-related projects, certainly local content is a very critical piece. Many companies, many countries actually have the requirement that certain percent of all content be local. That comes back with your understanding of your customer set. Certainly, you need to understand the value proposition that you bring. You're bringing in a new product, and you're bringing in a product that if it's absolutely new and novel, and you're the only guy making it, you're going to get some great headway there. The chances are you're producing a product that may be produced in country already, or used over there, and you're going to go there to steal market share from somebody else. So you need to understand what they're going to expect. You need to understand why they would buy your product over others, why they would buy a foreign product over others. I have lots of scar tissue about going into markets where the client, in one case a government agency, said, "We really liked your product. It's great, but recognize you are selling into a national asset, and I can't specify your product because you're a foreign buyer. So I need to have, in this case with China, I need to have Chinese content in your product, or else I can't buy it." So that's an exception possibly, but that is a recognized issue that you really need to take a look at, is the local content rules. And then also just think about, do you really need a presence? Do you need to have channels? Or are you better off just taking your website and your e-presence basically up and say, I want to expand my ability to sell into other markets using my resources here at home. It's an option to think about as part of your overall planning aspect that you're doing in your assessment. Product compliance. Is your product exportable? There are many regulations that the United States has having to do with the export of products, certain control technologies, certain things that are, we choose to take a tight rein on and not ship overseas. Understand what you have. Can you get a license to sell it? Do you need a license to sell it? Is it under EAR 99, general license, not required? These questions are all easy to answer. The resources are online. You can use the Department of Commerce sites and other online resources and get all these questions, whether it's, it needs an export control classification number, whether it needs any kind of other commercial commerce list classification. These things are readily available on site, online, and you can find them, but it's another part of what you want to take a look at. Your customer set, are you free of sanctions? Can you freely sell to that country? Can you sell only certain ways? Again, look it up. These things are readily available, and lots of resources in this room that can give you guidance in those areas. Continuing with the compliance thing, depending on the commodity and product you sell, you're going to need, in most countries, some kind of certification, some kind of assessment that says your product is safe, your product, especially if you're talking about health-related products or medical devices, they have a ton of restrictions and certifications that you'll need to go through. Understand them, plan for them, do those certifications. A lot of things do travel well. U.S. certifications that do travel to foreign markets, but you need to understand those applications. Not overbearing. Sometimes they can be. Medical devices is one. Edwards, I'm sure, can tell you lots about the devices they have to do and the controls that they have to go through. One other point I'll talk here about on the product and the compliance aspect of it is the tariff process. This really can destroy your competitiveness. If you're going into a market that has an artificially high tariff, and Jim mentioned the TPP and the reduction of tariffs, this is why it's important. If you go into a market that has a 15% import duty, basically a tariff on your product, so now you're selling your product at what you think is a reasonable margin. You're selling it into a market where they're going to put 15% duty on top of that. You have transit costs on top of that. All of a sudden, your margin erosion is immense. You may not be getting the margin that you want. You may not be getting all the benefits of going into those markets. So plan for that. Understand the tariffs. Understand when they apply and when they don't. Basically, these are duties. We would love to get these duties absolutely reduced, as TPP will allow us to do in many cases. But it is something that really will eat away at your profitability. Logistics. How do you get your product to market? Next question. This can be really scary, but the reality is it's probably one of the easiest. We mentioned UPS. Working with the freight forwarders and customs brokers that are available here, some in this room, really make it easy. It's automated in many sense. There are a series of questions that you would ask, which are shown on the next page here. You tell them what you want to do. You tell them what your product is. You come up with your own understanding classifications and things. But they can make it really easy for you to export. So that's the good part. You figure out what you want to do, how you want to get it there, and you contact these guys, and they make it happen. And it's really an important aspect, and something that really helps the product go forward. Now, how do you get paid? This is the biggest fear for most people, and absolutely the one you want to focus on very carefully. Reason being, you can really get burned here. We do a lot. We're approaching roughly $50 million in revenue, and we do about 70% of our business international. And almost all of that business is done under some terms of letters of credit. The letters of credit work really well. You take all the terms that you have decided with your customer for a product for payment, you document those, and then you turn it over to the bank, essentially, who then becomes the judge. They don't know what you make. They don't particularly care what you make. They just, you have agreed with your customer that you're going to ship them 500 pieces of this, you're going to deliver these 3 pieces of documentation, and when that's in the hands of the bank, they're going to release money. It's a great way to minimize risk. That's a little bit oversimplification of the process. But letters of credit become an excellent way of minimizing your risk. If you go to some of the other things, cash in advance, you may or may not get that. Certainly for bigger transactions, you won't get that. If you go to some open account term, that's very risky for you. Everything you want to do here in your cash management and in getting paid is to minimize your risk. And there are several ways to do that. Factoring, commercial resources, third-party escrows, other ways to keep your risk down. But overall, you want to get to the point of minimizing your risk. Exim is listed up here too, another wonderful resource. We use Exim a lot. It's been essentially a working line for us, both on the accounts receivable, some of the manufacturing lines. Excellent, excellent tool. Cash is king. You don't be financing your customers. Especially if you're a small, mid-sized business here, you don't have the resources to necessarily finance your customer. They're buying from you in large quantities, and they're expecting you to carry the risk. You have a long lead time from the time you start manufacturing your product. If you're selling to a market that includes 30 or 45 days in transit time through ocean freight and custom clearance, and you have a 30-day manufacturing cycle, let's say, you're looking at 75, 90, if you give them a 30-day term beyond that, 120 days in the cash cycle. That's very, very difficult for small companies to be able to manage that, especially if they're large transactions. So you need to find ways to set payment terms such that your out-of-pocket expenses are always covered up front. You're essentially working at neutral. So get an upfront payment, get something in the terms to set your Incoterms such that you're paid on presentation of the materials at the port, different ways to do that. But get the clock started so you're getting paid. If you have to wait, you become a bank. And banks business, but that's not you. Export compliance. Know what you need to do. This is another easy thing to do. There are lots of resources out there to know what you have to comply to. There are many resources in this room, people that are specialists in export compliance, but it is your obligation. No one's going to come back and tell you after the fact, hey, you needed to do something. The penalties are quite large for not understanding that. Know your obligations, get out there and figure it out, but lots of help to make it go easy. Protection from the customer standpoint and your partner standpoint is really do know them. It's great to take the leap to go into these things, depending on the size of the transaction. And again, much of this is focused on larger transactions. The typical transactions we do are multi-million-dollar transactions. So it's we have lots of protections we have to build into this. But your partners, you really need to know them. You need to know everything about them and their history and the way that they go forward with stuff. Then a couple of things. Contractual. Do the contract English language. Do not do it in Chinese, as an example. Chinese is a language of pictures, or Japanese. Open to interpretation. Pick English. Insist on an English language contract. This is our experience. Many in here will have different ideas, possibly. This has been a critical thing for us. Contract in the English language. Venue for arbitration or disputes in a neutral court. Singapore if you're in Asia. London if you're going west. Sorry, to the European side. Pick a neutral venue. Make the contract in very distinct language. English is a very exact language when it comes to legal terms. Think about that. And then FCPA. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act applies to everything. All of your transactions, all of your partners. You must comply with that, and there really is no way around that. And that's also just common sense. When you look at FCPA training, there's a lot of FCPA training on the internet. You can do training and get certified on it. It's really an important thing to do. Brand consideration, intellectual property. Two key points here, and then we're probably going to have to slide off this thing. If you don't file your IP, if you don't file your patent in a particular country, you cannot expect patent protection in that country. You need to move. The same thing with trademarks and some of your brand equity items. If you don't file in those countries, you do not have protections in those countries. Another important point is do not rely on litigation as your remedy for IP infringement. It will cost you millions of dollars, and it will take you a very, very long time to do that. And the timing for that is also quite critical too. You want to file somebody's because they've used your name or they look like they're doing the same thing. If they haven't caused you any commercial damage, there's really nothing to collect. So there's a timing aspect having to do with IP protection as well. But you must file, you must know the markets you're going into, and project your IP and your trademarks into those markets. Last thing on resources. I've mentioned several times that there are plenty of resources available out there. Here are some of the resources that are in this room, and you can hunt these people down as we go through it. Their websites are up there also. Do access these points. They are great resources. They're available to you immediately. Many of them are very, very low cost or free, and they do an excellent job. So we've taken a very fast flyby across a very big topic. Just mentioned a few things that I feel are important, having done this for a very long time, and as I like to say, have lots of scar tissue and scab to show how to do this. I'm available if you want to ask any questions afterwards on it, but it's a good topic, one that you can get good resources for all through the building here and others. But do not be afraid to go to these markets. I put up a lot of concerns and fears here, but there are many ways to get around this, and it's just an excellent way to go. We couldn't build our business without having gone to the market. We specifically built our business around the export market. For us, 85% of our customer base is outside the United States. So we do large transmission projects, and it is the #1, usually in the top 2 or 3 infrastructure items or electrical infrastructures in the top 2 or 3 budget items of every developing nation. So for us, this multi-billion-dollar opportunity was a great way to go. So thank you for your time, and we went fast, so any questions, you can see me afterwards. Thank you.